Oops, I guess I should unmute. Sorry. Welcome to the United States of America podcast. If you've missed past episodes, please be sure to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you, and we are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. And if you have questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with Greg Clarkson, regenerative farmer and ASN on Kansas. And now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Hey, Greg. Hey, Anna.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
So Greg is buried in snow.
Yes.
Been dealing with a whole bunch of snow on snow.
It's
Anna
the time
still
of year that I always say, why do we have live animals?
Then you have Anna, who's still got her Christmas tree up because she's dealing with so much craziness.
That's right.
Ours just came down this morning, so we just barely beat you.
Well, you know, I wouldn't have had it up except for a staffer, so I'm going to have to ask somebody to come in and help me do it again. You know?
Hey, it's very nice ambiance. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. But Anna, I mean, I think all our minds are blown. I mean, listening to you last night, let me just do a little recap of what I think is happening. And then you're going to tell me how wrong I am and fill us in on the real thing that's happening. My comprehension of what is going on is there is this brand called Trump that's supposed to be trying to walk into an office that doesn't exist because the municipal government no longer exists. And if they would just have done the honest, honorable thing to return the purse strings to the owner, then we could have started doing a conscious, thoughtful dismantling of systems that, like they have a dual everything. There's two positions for everything because they have the municipal government, you have the territorial government, and neither one of whom is which actually doing what we want them to do for the real living people. So we would be able to sift and sort and reposition all the people and, make it so that there isn't going to be this horrific collapse in infrastructure and people in the things that people are relying on, and on top of everything else, all the finances. And then if they just need to admit that we're home, that we're back, and they see us because they know we're here, and just stop messing around. And so when you talk to folks who are standing on the land and soil, who are conscious of what's going on, a lot of folks are like, just get us our funding and tell them to go kick rocks. But like, we can't do that because we have a responsibility not to cause harm, which they're not considering all of those aspects. Is this about where we're at right now? Is this what's going on?
Well, if I were to try to describe it, you have a partnership between the British government and the Pope's government. And it's a very long-standing partnership where they undertake things together without the rest of us knowing that they're operating together. And then they split the receipts of their projects 60-40. Okay, so that's who's been running both the municipal government. The Holy Roman Empire has been operating the Federal Civil Service, FEMA, BATF, IRS, all those things. Department of Labor, DOL version, Department of Defense, DOD version. All that has been run by the Holy Roman Empire, which isn't supposed to exist anymore, but which does exist. And so the Pope's operation has been running the Federal Civil Service, and the military has been running the military departments and that sort of thing. But they're both together. They've been together from the very beginning. And as it turns out, the President of the United States rules over both. Okay, so that one office was set up so that one man could occupy it as an officer of the king, pardon me, in the military service, and could then also operate as an elected official for the other side of it. So that's how the presidency of the United States has been operated ever since George Washington. And I'm not sure if I found the answer that I've been seeking, because a few people seem to break from the mold. They don't appear to be military officers or bar attorneys. But, the vast majority of presidents of the United States have been either military officers or they have been bar attorneys. Every single president from George Washington to Lincoln was either or a military officer. So you see, these two things have been secretively working in the background and controlling a great deal of what goes on in the public eye anyway, since the very beginning. Now, we initially thought that Trump didn't, and so couldn't be considered a military officer, and certainly isn't a member of the Bar Association, an officer of the king in that sense. But then something has surfaced just recently. It turns out that Mr. Trump was engaged as a young man in a lot of these like military school events, sort of like upper class ROTC. Anyway, he went to a fancy military school, and he was a cadet at West Point. But he was. And if he was, hello?
It seemed like you froze. It seemed like you froze for a moment. And so what you're saying is important, but we just couldn't hear the part about Trump was in a military school, something about West Point. Oh, kind of froze there.
School as a young man, and then he was a cadet at West Point. Now, nobody knows that. Whoever heard of that? But and if he was at West Point, then he must have received some kind of rating. He must have a military officer's rating of some kind, sort of like when you enter the British Navy as an officer, you enter as a midshipman candidate. Okay, so he received a military rating at West Point. So then it may be possible to kind of weasel around things and say, yes, well, he is a military officer. A very junior military officer, but a military officer with a rating nonetheless. You see the point? Anyway, that may be how he was able to qualify as president, as a candidate for president, without being obviously either a bar attorney or a military officer. See, there may be that little hidden loophole there.
That's interesting.
Anyway,
you mentioned two, Anna. Who was the other one?
I'm not sure that there is.
Okay.
There are some people that appear not to be, but then they may very easily have had some other kind of loophole,
Okay.
We haven't been able to delve and dig enough into each and every president to know for sure. But right. Certainly we know for sure between Washington and Lincoln, they were all military officers who then had a obligation to the British king under the power sharing agreements that were established by the Constitution of the United States of America, or they were members of the bar and had a obligation to the king under the provisions of the Esquire office. So the President of the United States has very long been a dual office, and it has very long served the administration of the territorial and municipal governments, not ours.
I was just curious about Reagan because I don't think he was a lawyer, but was he a military officer well before his acting career?
Mm.
I don't know, and I don't know if there's some provision by which they can, give an honorary military office. For example, we know that the infamous Colonel Mandel House, who was so instrumental in making Woodrow Wilson sign off on the Federal Reserve and other aspects of the current regime, was a man who was called colonel but had no known military rank. I imagine that the king or the queen could just arbitrarily do the old dub on the shoulder, and here now you're ranked as a colonel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Reagan was knighted in 89.
That was after his
term.
Yeah.
But anyway, whether he's knighted or not, they could have given him a military rating to allow that. And, this whole business of presidents being knighted and senior generals being knighted, I mean, really, people should have been up in arms about that years ago. It should have been an outrage and an affront to the American people that their leaders were being knighted by British kings and queens. And, it should have been an obvious conflict of interest. And, why people didn't wake up then, I don't know.
They just think everything's like, some kind of superstar badge, Anna. They don't comprehend what being knighted actually means. Because we're talking about people who are being educated by social media or television, and the movies. And they think that, it's just a glamorous thing. It's, really cool, to go. And they don't get it, that he's bending the knee to the queen.
Right. Well, and, for an Englishman, it's a great honor. But for an American, it's ridiculous.
Right.
And it's a betrayal of your nation.
I mean, but we're all equal though, right, Anna? Because we're so equal. And that's, they've trained everybody to believe that we're all equal and we're all the same and there's no discrimination and blah, blah, blah. And they don't get that there are traditions and different cultures and different areas. And then that, you actually want to have we don't do allegiance, but you want to have some honor in your own home. Like, don't you want to honor your home?
Your family.
Well, I think that the feudal system that knighthoods are part of and that the esquire system of the attorneys are part of is a legal binding obligation to serve the king.
A contract. Okay? Right.
It's a contract. Mm-hmm. And so if you accept a knighthood, you become a vassal and servant of the king. If you accept an esquire office, you are obligated to serve fealty to the king. So all of these things have been hidden from us, but obvious to the Brits.
Right. And word is bond. People don't know, like, this isn't just some slang term. When you say that my word is bond, they gave them their word. And so they were bonded to them in agreement, like you say, as a vessel and, under the contract. And, Anna, we were talking about this the other day, when you used to spit in your hand and shake, it was the same as cutting the hand and doing becoming blood brothers. But that's the seal, right? Like, it's the same thing as sealing a deal isn't it?
Right. Well, the thing is, in the ancient feudal system, a child was understood to have a fealty, an obligation owed to the king, to the sovereign, from the time that they were born, but they weren't really expected to um, undertake those duties until they were sentient enough to understand what the duties were. And so they would commonly uh, wait until the child was, say, 10 years old before they could take a fealty oath. And this is the tradition of the British Navy, is that the youngest midshipmen were about 10 years old. And they would, swear their fealty to the king and the crown at the age of 10 and go to sea.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, over time, this tradition of at least waiting until they were 10 eroded to a point where it was presumed that you had this obligation from birth onward. And anyone born in any of the British realms was presumed to have a fealty oath at birth. And so then their allegiance is pledged for them to the king and crown. Now,
Wow.
yes, and it's outrageous. It's totally outrageous because these people were promised a constitutional monarchy, and what they received was a territorial oligarchy. And, so they've been living under a phony military government for the past 300 years and have been constantly at war and have not been able to enjoy the rights and freedoms that their Constitution provides. And they've been under the same sort of mess that we have.
Mm. So
And
what are we going to do? What are we going to do now, Anna?
What are we going to do?
Yeah,
We're
like
going to
what are
throw it
you?
off.
Yeah, what's the plan? Like we're having a discussion about comprehending what's going on. I know a bunch of people are just concerned about the banks, and you've explained that to death, like, on the Monday nights. But I'm trying to figure out, like, this is a big deal. That's next Monday, the 20th. This
Oh, well,
this is what I mean,
he'll
when
be taking over. But
will he? Will he? I mean, they're going to go ahead and do this theater of the
look at
inauguration.
it. The municipal government no longer exists. The
Right.
territorial government exists. So, and he's already president of that. So that's why he's taking over even before the inauguration. He's not going to enter into the municipal office, and he already has the territorial office. So,
Right.
he's just continuing on as commander in chief, and that's sufficient for him to function. So
Right.
that's, there won't be the big inaugural address and all that hoorah, because that was all something that was associated with the Roman municipal government. And you can trace this back now. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's first inaugural address is a bizarre piece of rhetoric. If you ever go back, take 15 minutes and read FDR's first inaugural address, and you'll see that it uses all sorts of church words, sanctify, consecrate. These are words that are church words. They're out of ecclesiastical law and context. Okay, and so you'll see that what he was doing with that of the municipal citizenry into slavery. And he was issuing certifications of this. He was actually talking about the clearinghouse certificates, the birth certificates that were going to be used to do this. And he was making this sound like it was some great noble sacrifice that they were making. And yes, indeed it was. It was they were being sold into slavery. And they were, being placed under performance bonds, and all sorts of other ugliness was happening to the municipal citizens of the United States as a result of his actions. And they were the very first ones to be trafficked, to be human trafficked. And they're trying to couch this in terms of their obligations as bondservants of Christ, and they're going to be trafficked out of their natural jurisdiction, and that these birth certificates, quote unquote, clearinghouse certificates, are going to be issued. And he was getting a great deal of money for that, you see. He was selling slaves.
Yep.
And he was selling these. So this is what was actually going on in 1933 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave his first inaugural address. But of course, to our ears, it made no sense. To us, not being familiar with churchy language and with clearinghouse certificates and the entire concept, even though he said it, he might as well have been speaking Greek for the Joe average American. They just kind of passed over their heads, and they kind of looked at each other and said, "What was that?" And then within a week, whatever curiosity that had created had passed, and the machine was set in motion.
Yeah. So a recent thing that I noticed, actually just this morning, I walked into my local little post office in my little town here, and on the door they had a sign that said that due to contract disputes with UPS as the private carrier, like FedEx has been associated with the post office. It said due to contract disputes with UPS, they'll no longer be receiving, or UPS, I think it said something to the effect of UPS has not stopped at the post office and will not be stopping at the post office for that contract relationship until these disputes are resolved. And it got me thinking, what's really going on there? Is there something, is there something more to that?
Well, one way to think of this, Greg, is that you've got these two giant parent corporations, and then you have all these franchises.
Mm-hmm.
The post office is actually multi-leveled and multi-organizationally empowered. So, for example, when you're looking at the postmaster, he is wearing 7 different hats.
Wow.
So got postal services, which are by the large are private incorporated entities that are providing the postal services for the post office. And there's a distinction between a post office and a postal service, you see.
Okay. Yep.
And then you have all these jurisdictional variants. You've got the APO and the FPO. You have the certified intergovernmental mail. You have the registered private mail. You have the mail that is expedited mail. All these different things. They all have to function across all these different jurisdictions. And so at every jurisdiction, there's a different post office or different postal service involved. And they have managed to operate this way and keep all of this straight for generations. Yeah, right. It's far more complex than we have any idea.
To the average individual that walks into the post office, none of that is apparent to us.
Right. None of it is apparent. And for example, zip coding. Zip coding is a municipal government system for routing mail.
Mm-hmm.
But rural route is post office. Okay. So and you can see how that works.
I was in, it was all the way up till I got out of high school that we had a rural route number for my mailbox.
You still
Rural
do.
route, yeah, that's true. We used that on our mail up until then, I should say, rural route 2. And, and then they, somewhere along the line, it got into everybody's head that no, you had to have an individual pigeonhole address.
Well, see, they were shutting down the actual post office and contracting out all of the services to postal services that were in different jurisdictions. And so
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So, yes, you can use your rural route, and you can go on YouTube and you can find out how to look up your rural route address if you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So
I already asked them and at the post office, am I still rural route 2? And they confirmed it for me. Yes, that's still rural route 2 because I only live a mile away from where I grew up. So I did that, with the post office. It's a small enough, homey little town that I go in there and ask a lot of questions. I ask I play dumb in a sense, but I ask a lot of questions about how it works.
have you ever seen their DVM manual? It's about that thick.
She showed me that. Yes.
Yes. And, only a small part of it may apply to us, but they have to have all of that information available. And it's really quite staggering how they've managed to do it over the years. But yes, I'm rural route 4, box 284.
Okay.
Yes. Well, and they will deliver mail. It will take longer for them to figure out where you're at, but they will find it. They'll dig it
in
out.
my little town, they don't even need an address in my little town. They just look at the last name. Oh, he lives out there.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing. The post office is the most beloved federal institution by far.
Yeah.
When it comes to popularity, the post office is the only federal service that really is popularly appreciated and that has a good reputation. I mean, with some exceptions where you have dishonest postmasters or that kind of thing. But if you look at it over time, the post office has maintained a very good reputation with the people of this country. And,
I agree.
It's very sad to see the post office eroded because it's probably a necessary service that the municipal government ever provided, that was absolutely necessary. And they did a good job,
Right.
And now they'll have to rely on subcontractors, and that's really too bad. It makes me feel like if we were set free to just be honest about how this whole thing was supposed to be organized and who's who, then for us to actually work with them as a federal subcontractor. People think that because the corporation dissolved and all the assets and everything of all these municipal corporations are now ours, essentially. They think that that the municipal government doesn't exist, but it does. Its unincorporated form is still there. It's just required to operate within the limitations of the Constitution, which makes them operate within the confines that were set for them under the Constitution. And they have to limit their operations to this one little boundaried area within the city of Washington, D.C. So essentially, they had to pull back. they had piggybacked along with the territorial government all over the country and established their own overlayment. Um, and now they have to retreat from that position and go to work under a completely different set of presumptions. And, we're seeing a lot of blowback from that. The territorial government hired them and paid them up through January 1st. And now, we kind of put it to them, well, if they're working for the federal territorial, they enter a different status and jurisdiction, and they become territorial employees. They don't somehow magically remain municipal employees once you guys take up the tab and start paying them. And converted into territorial employees, or they have to be let go. And if they're let go, then going to be responsible for their operations? Who's going to be responsible for FEMA, for example? And, these various other governments have come in and tried to buy up large chunks of the municipal government apparatus, which would cause us no end of trouble.
Right.
And so we've basically gone back to the UN, which is the operating branch of the Holy Roman Empire at this point, and said, okay, well, here's the situation. We're the priority creditors. We're the ones that are standing on the land and soil jurisdiction of the country. We basically paid for all of these facilities and assets. So we're claiming the right to all of these different municipal corporations. And they looked at it and they said, yes, there's really no way to get around that. And so you are the inheritors, the priority and preferential creditors of all these municipal corporations. Okay, so now we've inherited all these municipal corporations, and they're just sort of sitting there going, and what do we do with them? Well, at the same time that we're doing that, Mr. Trump is coming in and taking over these municipal corporations and their operations as a matter of quote unquote national security. And of course, the military is better equipped to do that at this point than we are. So he's been acting for us. And, that's part of what's been happening with the whole discussion that he went through with Trudeau in Canada. The municipal corporation named Canada in all caps, right, is no more. The franchise is bankrupt. So Trump goes up there and he basically strong arms Trudeau and says, well, you guys owe us $100 billion a year. Our trade deficit with you stinks. It's all one-sided. Why don't you just throw in the towel and become the 51st state? We'll just call you Governor Trudeau. And he wasn't joking. He was, taking over that municipal corporation in bankruptcy and, taking control of it. And in the process of taking control of that at the municipal level, then he also inherits an interest in the territorial level. And so the people of Canada are left with their claim to the land and soil of Canada. But both of those corporations, the municipal corporation and the territorial corporation, are bankrupt and or so deeply in debt that they couldn't possibly pay their debts to us. So that he has a lot of leverage to come in there and try to work out some sort of deal where he gets control of Canada. Now, from our standpoint, what he's doing is improper and incorrect because he may be responsible for collecting our debts for us, but he isn't responsible for exercising the debt. The debt actually belongs to us. It doesn't belong to him. And the British territorial government paid nothing toward any of the debt that Canada owes us. It's not his debt. And we didn't authorize him to act for us regarding that debt. I mean, we didn't tell him go up to Canada and strong arm Trudeau, even though we're glad to see Trudeau go. We're glad he's resigned, blah, blah. We think he had a horrible government. We think he was dictatorial and immoral. And, we're glad to see Trudeau go. It's still a fact that if anyone was going to do strong arming with regard to the debt, the people who are actually owed the debt should be the ones making the move. And they should be the ones that are telling Mr. Trump what to do or not do with regard to collecting that debt. You see what I mean?
Yeah, we make the decision that we want the debt collected, and then we tell him, go do this now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So we are once again in position to take up our responsibility. Now, when we began this, a lot of people were wondering, well, what does a state assembly do? It's like, all right, well, we're all here. What do we do? And I actually had to explain that it's the state assembly's job to set the goals and priorities for the state.
Right.
The state assemblies are supposed to be sitting up here near the very, very tip top of the entire organizational scheme, and they're supposed to be setting the policies and priorities for the state. And they should be the ones that are making decisions about, all these different organizations and corporate franchises owe us lots of money. Who are we going to collect from? And how are we going to collect? And, what are we going to do in terms of debt forgiveness? And some of these debts are odious debts. They were created by means of fraud, and they need to be just completely exonerated and discharged as if they never existed. What are we going to do, for example, with all these state-of-state franchises?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Because the state of Kansas, state of Alaska, that's no different than Canada, the Canada franchise, right? They're all franchises from effectively no difference.
Right.
Yeah.
For a multinational parent corporation.
Yeah.
And so, do we want to continue on being served by a foreign state of state, or do we want to operate our own state of state?
I see.
There are many different decisions that the state assembly. If the state assembly says, okay, well, our priority is to replace the bridges here, here, and here, and to, correct the water reservoirs here, here, and here, and to, open up this gigantic new agricultural project that, protects the farmland from electromagnetic frequency damage. These are things that the state assemblies can address, should address. This is their role, is to make these sorts of decisions for their state, and also to work with other states on multi-state initiatives.
And that's where the subcontractors, whoever we choose them to be, would then go execute that wish.
Exactly. And so, say you in Kansas and Missouri and a couple of adjoining states all got together and decided to do a multi-state irrigation project,
Hmm.
whatever. Then you could work together, and the state assemblies would be the members, would be the representative body in each case that would be working on this. And so the state assemblies have a lot of work to do. They just don't know that they should be doing this work.
Right.
It's kind of funny. But the state assembly does have the authority and does have the position to be able to tell the state of state what they want done. If you don't want driver's licenses to be issued in your state because of all the adhesion contract aspects of that. Ooh, just a second, guys. I've got to take this.
Yeah,
Um,
it leads to a question, Niti, I was thinking about with Canada.
yeah.
So it was just a franchise, a multinational franchise, but underneath it is the land and soil, Canada, and it's a nation state.
Mm-hmm.
A nation state. North Carolina is a nation state. Well, but what my question is for Anna is Canada the provinces individual nation states like ours, what we call our states are, or is all of Canada a nation state? And I don't know. I don't know enough about
Mm-hmm. I think
that.
it's all a nation state because they call theirs provinces.
I thought so. That's what I was
Yeah, they're not.
assuming.
They're like in Israel. There's regions, or like around the world. Well, when we were setting up, as we're working on this LRO, right, for the
Uh-huh.
title office. So there's, um, I mean, if they have anything besides the state, like the regions or the provinces, then that's within their nation state.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
So that was what I figured out. I just want to pop this up here. Oh,
Oh
Anna's
yeah.
done. There she comes back.
Good.
I'm
There you go.
back.
Yay. I mean, Anna, am I wrong about that? Because I'm pretty sure that I don't remember if you told me this or who told me, but the provinces and the regions are within a nation state. So Canada is not like the United States where we are multiple states, nation states. They are just provinces within the one nation state of Canada, correct?
That's correct. But if each one of them were to vote, they could be a state. And then
Oh,
you could, yeah, right now they're territories,
oh,
right?
so they can pretty
Oh,
much
so they
stand
just
up.
have they could go through what we went through with statehood then.
Hmm.
Right,
Interesting.
right.
That is very interesting. I wonder if they even know.
Well, if they don't, they will know. But for example, Saskatchewan could become the state of Saskatchewan, and they could be entered under equal footing doctrine and
Mm.
under the Northwest Ordinance, just like anybody else, because it's just an administrative blip between uh, what we do with territories and what they do with territories. They let their provinces remain as territories forever, uh, but we open up the option of them having true statehood and being nation states unto themselves. So they could be Alberta would be the state, and they would have a state of Alberta for uh, routine government services, while the state assembly is set free to make the policy and priority decisions.
That's really cool considering that the Trump brand is trying to reorganize them as one state within us. I mean, people should be paying attention to this because they're promoting it across, in this broad scope. And I think that folks need to be asking more questions, and they don't seem to be asking enough questions. Like, I'm interested to know on January 21st what's gonna happen.
Well, I can tell you one of the interesting things that's going to happen is that Mr. Trump is launching the External Revenue
I
Service.
saw that.
Next, what's he trying to do?
Tariffs.
Well,
That's crazy.
no, look at it this way. It was internal to what? Them. And
Right.
what was the income tax really? It was a payroll kickback tax.
Mm-hmm.
It was intended to tax federal employees for the privilege of being federal employees and to latch back onto a portion of their wages in support of the government parent
Mm.
corporation. You see, so the parent corporation got down at heels and greedy, and so they basically established a payroll kickback tax, which was the internal revenue. You see, they're talking about themselves as uh, a separate citizenry and a
Mm.
separate government, and so it was internal to them, right?
Mm.
Okay, so then they come along and they start arbitrarily redefining all of us as federal dependents and workers. And they start glomming on to a portion of our earnings, even though we're not employed by them and even though we're not dependent on them. And so they had to excuse this by claiming that we volunteered. That's why
Yeah.
you hear it's a voluntary tax.
Right.
It had to be voluntary in order to be legal.
Mm.
And if you go through the tax code, you will very quickly see that there are lots and lots of resident aliens and non resident aliens.
Mm.
So, what is all this talking about? Well, the non resident aliens are us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, where this all came push to shove, and most of us aren't old enough to remember this at all, but our parents certainly were old enough. And if you were lucky like me, your parents gossiped endlessly about government and what was going on in the country. Okay, so during the Second World War, um, Congress unveiled what it called the victory tax.
Mm.
Okay, and it was a voluntary tax. Uh, of course, the federal government employees were all paying income tax. And the victory tax was an opportunity for all the rest of us who weren't federal employees or weren't employed by state of state franchises to step up and give an equal portion of our wages or our earnings uh, in the war effort, right? So millions of Americans raised their hand, and it wasn't a real big deal. I mean, it was like $1 a week or something toward the war effort. And so millions of Americans raised their hand, and the legislation itself um, is supposed to sunset at the end of hostilities,
Hmm.
uh,
Mhm.
right?
Hence
But
the reason for no end of the
Yeah.
hostilities.
well, yeah, right. Well, uh, yeah, that's part of the reason they keep making these wars on poverty and war on this, war on that. But actually, it was supposed to sunset with the end of the Second World War and didn't. And Congress should have been held feet first, flaming to the fire for that. Okay, so this is how they entrapped millions of Americans into paying a foreign tax for the rest of their lives.
So it's interesting. I remember my grandmother talking about this, and what I find ironic is the letter V, which we've had the letter V recently, right? Also,
Mhm.
but my grandmother said it was a way to shame people into it. If you didn't do it, you weren't patriotic. It
Right.
was a lot of shame placed on people. And so, therefore, those people that experienced it firsthand, went ahead and probably signed up, not really wanting to, but they didn't want to be cast out as non-patriotic or whatever. But then after that, it became institutionalized within the family. Oh, well, this is what you do.
Yeah, well, and you also see the federal income tax, which maybe $1 a week to a third of your income rather handily, didn't it?
Yes.
To half.
Yes.
To half when you're a business owner, it's pretty much half. And so now you're saying this external revenue service is going to be, oh, we were already taxing the employees. Why don't we just tax everybody? Sounds familiar.
I think maybe what the external revenue service will be is for them trying to recoup from other countries and other sources revenue that or it could be any kind of tax, could be tariffs. Trump has been talking a lot about tariffs. Tariffs are external taxes. Customs duties are external taxes. Many of the things that we think of as indirect taxes, like utility company taxes and taxes on gas and oil and things like that, are actually external taxes. So, he may be getting ready to make use of those tariff laws to a far greater extent than has been used in the past. And that's what he's indicated, is that he's going to start exercising a system of tariffs to bring back the trade balance and impose some degree of discipline on the market.
Well, there's a great example of, with this Canada, all caps Canada situation, where Trump has taken it upon himself to do this. And to your point, we didn't necessarily ask him to do that. They're just doing that. And while that may be one way to get paid back, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it's not our decision for him to do that, or it doesn't appear to me to be that way. So he's just acting, taking it upon himself,
Right.
him and his administration. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I had to raise my hand and say, hey, wait a minute, that's our debt, not your debt you're collecting.
Right.
And,
well, I guess, Mr. Trump, here's the bank account. So once you collect, it goes here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, and here's the thing. Tariffs are used. Okay, are you guys ready to go on a little adventure? It'll take us maybe 15 minutes into the next hour, but are you ready to go on a little?
I got clean paper. I'm ready.
Sure.
All right. We're going to be talking about tariffs because Trump is discussing the use of protective tariffs to adjust the balance of trade and various other aspects of the economy. So we need to understand what tariffs are, and we need to understand the relationship of tariffs and customs duties to central banks. And this is a fascinating little piece of history that I want everybody to thoroughly understand. We have central banks now, and everybody takes it for granted that we have central banks. But not so long ago, during the same time period that the British were creating their bastardized version of law called equity law, which is a weird combination of elements of land law and sea law, and all of that, all those shady deals and fraudulent misrepresentations were taking place in Britain. In Germany, Frederick II, Frederick the Great of Prussia, was fighting a series of mercenary wars known as the 7 Year Wars. And at one time, he had all of Europe was on him. There were like 15 countries coming at him from all different angles, trying to take down the Kingdom of Prussia. And of course, Frederick the Great was known as Frederick the Great because he repulsed them all. But one of the things that Frederick the Great gave us was the central bank concept. And it was actually a relative of mine, a distant relative, obviously, but a distant relative of mine, Baron Steinen von Stoll, was whose name actually means rolling stone. That's what my family name means, Reichenstein. It means traveling stone or rolling stone. But anyway, this Freiherr, this Earl in the Prussian cabinet, came up with the idea of a central bank as a means of controlling imports, and specifically the import of coffee. Coffee was just at that point being introduced to the European palate from South America. And so people in Germany were buying vast amounts of coffee, and they were converting their German silver coins into coffee, right? And this became a concern for Frederick the Great, who used coffee as a shoe polish, among other things.
Wow.
But anyway, yes. And so it was his particular personal fetish that they were buying too much coffee. And so the central bank was used as a means of restricting coffee imports into Prussia. And central banks have been used for commodity manipulation ever since.
Wow.
Which is something that people miss. And so Mr. Trump, knowingly or unknowingly, is about to put his foot right in the middle of that issue of the use of tariffs, which are a province of the central bank. So if you were to look at this, you would have to look at it in terms of an unknown central bank at this point, having control of tariff collections and duties, customs duties, on products coming into this country. Now, I personally think it was all a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
I think that the entire concept of commodity rigging and tariffs and using central banks as a means to, control trade is a terrible idea.
Right.
I mean,
Telling us what we can and cannot have and what we can and cannot buy.
Yeah. And I'm sure that if my relative who started it all were here today, he would tell you, no, that was a terrible idea, and I only did it because, he would apologize. He would be, terribly abhorred at what's happened. But
So one thing with that central bank in Prussia, with Frederick the Great, was the other thing he was trying to do was stop silver from flowing out.
Right.
Because the central bank will then set up a ledger, right? Okay, we bring this much coffee in, we ship you this much wheat, and then you're not trading coin at that point.
right.
Which is smart. That was actually, I thought that was
Well,
the good part. You were going to tell us that he was saving the
Well,
money.
he was a brilliant man, and
Yeah.
he made it work. He made it serve the purpose without hurting anybody. But it's still, I think the entire concept of the central bank and the use of the central bank as a means to control commodities, that is a concept that needs to be examined by the public, and it needs to be very strictly observed and regulated in and of itself. Otherwise, you have a situation like we've got now, where we have monopolization of banking, we have monopolization of law, we have monopolization of trade, and it's not healthy. It's not the way things should be. And
What I
Right. That's why they started these nonsensical carbon credits. Can we, like,
Well, what I always
right,
thought of, back in macroeconomics, I'm an engineer, but I took economics just to make the business people mad by getting A's on all the tests. But what I actually had an argument with about one of the professors in a macroeconomics class was he was a proponent of tariffs. And I was saying, no, free trade is the way it should be because otherwise you're messing up the natural order of things. There's a reason why countries are richer than others because they have more natural resources. And it's just the way it is. If you are
well,
rich in natural resources, you're going to be a rich country. But when you start to get tariffs and central banks and everything else, you can make a poor country seemingly rich when there's really nothing underneath it. It's just all fake, basically.
well, look at England. What is England actually?
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
rock. It's a rock
Yeah.
in the middle of the Atlantic. It's
If it was free trade, if we'd had free trade this whole time, they would be nothing.
right,
They'd be a stopover point to get to the mainland Europe.
right. I mean, they'd be an exporter of wool and nice sweaters. They would have certain little niche markets that they were really good at, and they'd be exporting things like hand-bound books and things of that nature to other countries, and they'd make a living, but they certainly wouldn't be a world power. And
Right,
and they,
and they can't be anyway. They're a rock, like you said. It would be appropriate for the size of what they are.
exactly,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and then they'd be forced to reinvest in their people and educating their people. They'd be forced to reinvest in their environment and
Hmm.
reforesting and all sorts of things.
But a country, or not a country, a continent, I should say, a bunch of countries that would be very rich that are oppressed today is Africa.
Well, we
Hmm.
know that, and BRICS knows that, and so
Yep.
BRICS is doing a incredible thing. They are getting blocks of countries in Africa that have similar problems or similar opportunities, and they're getting
Mhm.
them together and they're funding these huge projects for like rail systems and agricultural fertilizer projects and all sorts of things. $800 billion worth of investment is going into Africa from BRICS. And unlike the punitive and controlling and ugly, usurious loan programs that the West had been imposing, the
Mhm.
BRICS nations are setting these loans up in a way that's realistic and um, reasonable. They're not trying to. I forget right off the top of my head what the buzzword was, but it was basically a way of enslaving the African countries to usury.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Well, the
so,
Federal Reserve franchise system,
yeah,
central banks.
yeah. Well, so now they are getting investment that is beneficial to them, and of course
Right.
they're aligning with the BRICS. So,
Yep. It's
and
beneficial to BRICS as well because they're creating more market by doing that.
oh, oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
we don't understand how big Africa is because it's misrepresented on our maps. But
Exactly. Yeah.
Africa is, well, Africa is every bit as big as Asia.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it has a wealth of labor force, and it has immense natural resources. And it was really just this little elitist group that had it in their head that black people were inferior,
Mhm.
that was keeping everything stopped up so that Africa couldn't couldn't live and grow and be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Do we
going
have
to
time for a
take a
couple?
little break here.
Okay.
Guys, actually, I should be buzzing on because it's already 11 minutes after the hour, and I have to get ready for the next run.
Okay.
So I'll let you guys continue on, and hugs and kisses to all, and I'll join you next week.
Thanks for the great discussion. Have a good day.
We appreciate it.
You guys.
Okay.
You guys, let's get Greg. Let's take.
Yeah, you want to do some questions, Niti?
Yeah, let's do a couple of these. So, a lot of the banking conversation that Anna has been doing, she's been telling us on Monday nights, and I get that there's a lot of folks here who are saying they don't get to listen to that, or they can't tune in, or I don't know, whatever. But I shared a link on here, which is where all the recordings are, so you can see them at your leisure. And so Anna she like literally at the beginning of the year and the end of last year, those few Mondays, I think she gave us so much information about what is happening, how it's going, because she knew that we had to address all this chaos with the Trump brand and what's happening with the municipal government, because they were over what, October 1st, was it, Gregor? Or September?
October 1st, and then the territorial funded them until January 1st.
Right.
So what's interesting though on the banking, I have a prosperity account, I have a trust account, and I have a vendor account on GFG.
Yes, me too.
So, and then what's interesting though is I guess a part of that, I'm on the email list, so I get the email updates, and we just got one January 8th, so not even a week ago. And it's really good to read these because it does tell you a lot, and it's talking through all the levels of banking that have to be put in place. And Anna covered last night about banking for people, living men and living women. That doesn't exist right now. So they're creating that from the land up, no pun intended. But then that has to tie into commerce, and that has to tie into international, and that has to tie into let's see, there's commercial. So there's commerce and there's commercial. So we'll have the prosperity unions for the people. Then you'll have a bank of commerce to tie into the banks that exist today as we know them, that then tie into commercial, that then tie into international. So you gotta, there's a lot to put together there. There's a lot to get from a AFD, an American Federation dollar for a living man, to a Swiss franc, let's say, if I want to buy a Rolex.
Yeah, the jurisdictions you're talking about.
Look at all you're passing through to get that Rolex back to you. Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of jurisdictions, just like Anna when she was just talking about the post office jurisdictions, and you know, like in my notes, it's like all these circles, because there's so many jurisdictions that have to be crossed to make this happen. And at the end of the day, you know, everyone's like, hey, can I just give you this AFD and you just give me the FRNs? No, we can't, because
a couple things that I think people really miss, but an FRN is only good here.
Right.
We do not trade FRNs internationally. Those are USDs. That's different than the bills in your pocket and what's in your bank account.
Right.
So right there, which is something that's been that way for our whole lives, Niti. I didn't know it until about 6 months ago.
Right.
That an FRN wasn't a USD and a USD wasn't an FRN.
Yes. And that Anna had to fight to keep, you know, the silver dollar in production so that we actually had value. Like a lot of people just have this blanket statement, you know, our currency is worth nothing. No, she did everything to make sure that it was worth something.
It depends on which currency you're talking about.
Well, you mean,
right? FRNs are worth nothing. USD is worth something.
Worth money. Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And all that maritime jurisdiction is what we're discussing when she's saying currency or the FR you getting the letters mixed up. Say it again, Greg.
FRNs,
Uh-huh.
which is what we
US
exchange
and the
within the
USDs.
country, and then USDs, which is an international trade thing, or a treasury thing, and then AFDs, of course, the American Federation dollar.
Right. And the international has to be backed by something.
Yep, exactly.
It is. That's the problem, friends. Like and so it's unlawful. And it's unlawful for her to give you an FRN for an AFD. It's unlawful because the FRN is worthless versus the AFD, which is gold. So there has to be a lot going on the way to that, which that's the reason why she was trying to get us the credit. They owe us the credit. Then that could, it's a very complex conversation. And, when we say go back to the beginning of these YouTubes that we've recorded with her and start at one and work your way forward, we mean it, because there's an enormous education between there and what we're talking about today. So like this person, SSK, whoever you are, you're asking all the questions that you're asking. We have discussed them on many episodes previously. Please start at the beginning and work your way forward so that you can, get caught up, because we're trying to keep the conversation going. And then this should be this YouTube. Anna wants to document things as we go so that you can know what's happening in real time and keep moving. So we're going to keep progressing with that. Right?
Yeah.
And I think this is a very important conversation that we had to have and comprehend. And you can see, it's going to be interesting to see what Trump does. I did want to ask her who is funding the military. So, it sounds to me like what she's saying is that the British territorial, she has the standing to come in and just do what they're doing. Like Trump is doing what he can do. Who is he being funded by? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I know she's mentioned at one point. Well, when the territorial funded the municipal from October 1st to January 1st, she mentioned, they would just reach into the coffers from the crown to do that.
So is it the crown, or do they actually have the access to the purse strings? Because supposedly the Biden, brand, because we know Biden is, it doesn't have anything to do with these people, you friends. It's just like their brand of administration was controlling the purse strings at some moment. So then what? They handed them to Trump?
I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't comprehend, I guess is the right term. Yeah.
I know we don't comprehend this. We want her to explain it a little bit more, and I wanted her to get to it, but there were so many other things. The conversation is so big. This is interesting.
I was doing a search on the Reagan thing while we were talking, and he was in World War II, at non-combat though, because of bad eyesight.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Just enough to get, all of these guys.
Yeah, exactly. Just enough to get eligible.
Just enough. They're just enough. They have to have something. So it's like a token, whatever. So anyway, I was looking to see if there were some other questions. There's some questions in here people don't want us to answer. So we'll just let them figure it out, and they can just wait until they can hear it from Anna. And then all of us are waiting on the same thing. I think that it'll be interesting. We have to it's just next week. Just next week. So it's going to be fascinating to see, what happens there. And I do try to get to the questions every week, you guys. And then when Anna's on a roll, we need to hear what she has to say. And time flies. Time flies when we're having fun. Next week,
the tariff discussion is always an interesting one, and in a practical sense, it sounds to me like if you want to buy anything from Canada, do it now.
A lot of things already aren't shipping. You know,
Yeah, I
a
don't
lot
know.
a lot of things that people are looking for. I
Aren't
mean, if
shipping.
you're just waiting to get it from, Amazon or whatever, it's not coming
Right.
because it's being imported. And so there's something going on, and we're going to start. I mean, there are places I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the stores are running out of things.
I just thought it was because we had 15 inches of snow. We haven't had the trash picked up for over a week. We haven't got mail for 3 days. I just thought it was the snow, but maybe the country's falling apart around me, and I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's
Mary's
both.
over here saying they don't want to hear answers from us, and that's fine. You don't have to hear answers from us. We're, referring you back to old episodes. And the other part of that is the questions that, I think Anna wants to make sure that we comprehend what's about to happen. And so watch the previous episodes, everybody, and catch up, because there is a lot to learn, and we have talked about all of this stuff. And stock up with the things that you need. And most of us, I mean, if you're living simply off the land, it's going to be fine. Like, we're going to be okay while we figure this out. Keep reading, keep studying. All right. We will see you guys next week. See you next Tuesday.
All right.